I caught my boss laundering millions, now I'm on the run. My name is Jason McCarthy. I'm 33 years old. And until 6 months ago, I was just another mid-level data engineer at a financial tech firm in Houston called Virex Solutions. I kept my head down, optimized code, cleaned up APIs, and delivered dashboards no one thanked me for. All I wanted was a raise. Not even a big one. Just enough to feel like I mattered. I thought if I could prove I saved the company money, like real measurable dollars, they'd finally give me a shot. So I started digging, not into code, into cost logs, vendor invoices, transaction logs tied to our cloud services. I wrote a script that scraped patterns across several accounts and lined them up with resource usage. Then I found something strange. A batch of service invoices from a company called Furnace Consulting. We paid them $28 a month for infrastructure optimization. But when I traced the actual logs tied to those invoices, there were no usage records. Nothing had changed. I thought maybe it was just lazy accounting. Then I looked up the company. Furnace Consulting didn't exist on LinkedIn. No real employees. Just a shell site with a stock photo office and a disconnected number. I brought it to my supervisor. Greg, who smirked, told me, "Don't overthink things," and said maybe it was internal tooling. That was my second red flag. So I dug deeper. It started with a hunch. It became a habit. I spent the next 2 nights at home combing through archived invoices. Every vendor we'd paid in the last 24 months. I cross-referenced names, INS, tax records, and server activity logs. I found 6 more vendors like Furnace. Same pattern. Monthly invoices. No technical footprints. Disconnected phone numbers. Vague services. Names like Arcadia Interfaces, Lansco Partners, and Myrotech Solutions. All billing between $15 to $60 a month. Altogether, the payments totaled more than $4.2 million. For services that didn't exist. My chest tightened. I knew what I was looking at. Someone inside the company was laundering money. And the front companies were part of it. And that someone had high-level access. I didn't want to believe it was Greg. He'd been my supervisor for almost 4 years. We joked about fantasy football. He gave me good performance reviews. But he had admin access. And all of these vendor approvals had his name on them. So I checked the routing metadata. All 6 vendor invoices had been uploaded from the same internal IP range, used only by executive-level terminals. Including Greg's office. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The gun came in the form of one internal memo I stumbled on buried in our content management system. A simple PDF labeled Q3 Black Projects. It had no metadata tags. No read receipts. It wasn't supposed to be there. And inside it? A breakdown of transfer flows from our operating budget to strategic off-ledger initiatives. With a separate spreadsheet outlining pass-through payments to, yes, Furnace, Arcadia, Lansco, and 3 others I hadn't even found yet. Next to each vendor was a name. Next to Furnace, Gregory H. Altman. My boss. I stared at it for over 5 minutes. It felt like falling. The kind where the floor gives out slowly. Not all at once. Greg wasn't just ignoring what I found. He was doing it. I called Jenna. Not her real name, but a friend from UT Austin who now worked in the financial crimes division of the SEC. Don't email anything. Don't put your name in any report yet. She said, if what you're seeing is real, you just cracked open a Class A felony-level laundering scheme. What do I do? She paused. Back up everything. Print hard copies. Store them off-site. And don't tell anyone you know. Not yet. That was Thursday. By Friday, I had 3 encrypted USBs hidden in separate places. A folder stashed at my cousin's. Printed copies in a box labeled, tax returns, at my mom's house. By Monday, Greg called me into his office. He was smiling. Hey man, he said, tossing me a LaCroix. You've been killing it lately. We're recommending you for a senior analyst promotion. You're gonna love the bonus. The raise I wanted. The moment I realized, they knew I was watching. And they were buying me off. I didn't take the bait. But I smiled. Thanks, Greg. Means a lot. Then I walked out, straight to the stairwell. And I ran. Because now I knew something else. I wasn't just watching them. They were watching me. I didn't sleep that night. My mind kept playing back the smile Greg gave me. Like he already knew what I was going to do. Like this was part of some test I hadn't agreed to take. Tuesday morning, I walked into the office like nothing happened. My hands were steady, but my stomach was tight. I sat at my desk, put on headphones without playing music, and started combing through internal messaging archives. Something told me this went beyond Greg. Way beyond. And I was right. There were traces of Slack threads long since deleted, backups I only had because of a legacy dev tool still scraping shadow logs. Conversations between Greg and another senior VP, Rachel Voss, referencing vendor, pacing, risk buckets, and, most cryptic of all, washing windows. That term showed up 6 times in different threads, always when they were discussing quarterly budgets or funding shortfalls. I flagged them all, cross-referenced them against the fake vendor payments. Every window washing comment correlated with a spike in payments to shell companies. And Rachel, she had final signature authority on all interdepartmental disbursements. Greg wasn't alone. I told Jenna. She immediately pushed me to file a secure disclosure with the SEC's whistleblower portal. They're covering each other. You can't take this on by yourself. But I hesitated. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't even know if the evidence I had would hold up. Then Wednesday came, and I got an offer. An envelope on my desk. No return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper with a typed message. $150,000 bonus. Transferred this Friday. Non-negotiable. You've earned our trust. Discretion expected. No signature. Just a routing code scribbled in pen. I plugged it into our internal tools. It matched an outgoing vendor payment line to a new fake company I hadn't seen before. Clarin Analytics LLC. The payment was pending. I was the vendor. They had created a shell company in my name. I nearly threw up. This wasn't hush money. This was entrapment. They were onboarding me into the ring, making me complicit. And if I took it, even accidentally, I'd be part of the laundering chain. I ran to Jenna's office that night. In person, we sat in her car for 2 hours. She said one thing that stuck. You're not safe anymore. You were a liability. Now you're an asset. That means they won't let go. I asked her what to do. She handed me a prepaid flip phone, a burner laptop, and a list of lawyers in DC who specialized in whistleblower cases. I can't be your handler, she said, but I can be your shadow. I left Houston that night. No goodbye, no explanations. I just disappeared. That was 2 months ago. Now I'm in a borrowed apartment, 3 states away, watching the walls, listening for knocks, and I'm ready to expose everything. Because this is bigger than Greg. Bigger than Virex. This is industrial-scale corporate crime. And I have the keys to unravel it. The burner phone rang for the first time at 2:17 a.m. I had been sleeping in my clothes. Laptop balanced on a pillow. USB drive tucked in a sock. The ringtone jolted me upright. Only one person had the number. Jason. Jenna whispered. They know you're gone. My stomach dropped. How? They pulled your access card logs. Flagged the IP addresses used to export system logs. Your security credentials are on their radar. You need to move. Tonight. I didn't ask how she knew. Jenna had contacts, people in enforcement, surveillance, maybe even counterintel. I trusted her with what remained of my sanity. I left the apartment in 20 minutes. Wiped the laptop. Left no fingerprints. Switched vehicles using a rental agreement Jenna prearranged under a fake name, Logan Burke. The next safe house was in rural Tennessee. 2 hours into the drive, I pulled over at a 24-hour diner and opened my laptop. I had to stay ahead. Understand who was involved, who could still blow this thing open wider. And that's when I found it. A hidden repo folder, linked through one of the shell vendors' archived HTML code. Someone had gotten sloppy. The metadata had a trail, an internal alias used only by Rachel Voss. The repo was titled, Project Deep Basin. Inside, spreadsheets, audio recordings, signed PDFs, and a communications diagram. At the center of the web was a name I hadn't expected. Michael Harrow, CEO of Virex. Greg and Rachel weren't masterminds. They were middle tier. The whole company was a shell. I sat in the car until sunrise, staring at the diagram. 27 names, 8 holding companies, 12 international transfers, all orchestrated under Harrow's oversight. Project Deep Basin wasn't just laundering millions. It was laundering influence, political donations, private investments in real estate, Payoffs to advisory board members. Bribes masked as philanthropy. Jenna had told me this was big. But this wasn't just corporate fraud. It was a networked economy of corruption. And I was the only one outside of it who had the map. I drove the next 6 hours in silence. Somewhere around Knoxville, Jenna messaged through the encrypted app. "You need a lawyer. I found one. Ex-FBI. He'll meet you off-grid." I didn't hesitate. Because now, it wasn't just about getting out. It was about bringing them down. He introduced himself as Vincent Hall. Gray hair, sharp suit, worn leather briefcase that looked like it had seen courtrooms and war zones alike. We met in a diner off the highway near Crossville, Tennessee. He slid into the booth across from me like we were old friends. "Jason McCarthy," he said flatly, "you're in a lot of danger. But if your files are clean, you just became the most valuable whistleblower in a decade." I handed over one of the encrypted USBs. He didn't even plug it in. Just tucked it into his case and slid over a document. "Preliminary Immunity Agreement Draft. If this is real, the Department of Justice will be very interested. But first, I need you to walk me through everything, from the beginning. No skipping, no embellishing." So I did. For 4 hours. The invoices, the metadata, the fake vendors, the envelope, the network diagram, Project Deep Basin. Vincent asked pointed questions. Not like a lawyer, more like a profiler. "Who signed off on your expense accounts? Who approved the back-end access change request in Q2? Who was copied on Greg's travel reports?" I answered everything. By the time we finished, he looked like someone who'd just found a live grenade under his bed. "This goes to the FBI," he said. "Not the SEC. Not the local field office. Mainline bureau. You're sitting on national-level criminal activity." He stood, pulled out a prepaid phone, and handed it to me. "One number saved. When it rings, you answer. No matter what." 2 days later, it rang. "Mr. McCarthy, this is Special Agent Keller. I'd like to talk." We met in a rented conference room in Nashville. 4 agents, 2 laptops, 1 recorder. They didn't threaten, didn't promise, just listened. I gave them everything. By the time I walked out, they had me signed on as a cooperating witness. The wheels were turning. But Jenna was right. Now that I was part of the case, I was also part of the risk. Vincent relocated me again. Different name, different address, different burner. And I waited. Because once the FBI starts pulling threads, it's only a matter of time before the whole suit unravels. And I had just handed them the thread. The FBI didn't wait long. Within days of my interview, they launched an internal surveillance operation on Virex Solutions. It started quietly: social media scans, open source financial monitoring, movement of funds. But within 2 weeks, things escalated. Subpoenas went out. Discreet interviews were conducted with former employees. One name kept resurfacing: Travis Hodge, Virex's head of global procurement. He wasn't in the Project Deep Basin files, but his signature was on 60% of the fake vendor payments. He was the new thread. And I was the bait. Agent Keller called me one evening. "We want to run a controlled contact," he said. "You'll reach out to Greg. Ask about the bonus. Say you're ready to take a more active role." I hesitated. "That's dangerous. Which is why we'll be recording every word. You won't be alone." The next day, I messaged Greg through an encrypted ProtonMail account I knew he still used. Subject line: "Ready to wash windows." The reply came fast. "Meet Friday, 10 p.m. private hangar. Terminal 6. No greeting, no explanation, just a location. FBI prepped me for 2 days. I wore a wire. My phone was swapped for a decoy with remote stream capability. Friday night, I arrived at the hangar. Empty except for a sleek black SUV parked near the entrance. Greg stood beside it, arms crossed. "Jason," he said, smiling, "didn't expect you to grow a spine." We talked for 10 minutes. About money, about trust, about discretion. Then he handed me a tablet. "Here's your onboarding packet," he said. "New entity in the Caymans. Your running point on Claren's East Coast flow. 8% skim, monthly." That's when I gave the signal. I scratched the side of my neck twice, exactly as trained. Within seconds, headlights exploded from both sides of the hangar. FBI, guns drawn, screams. Greg tried to run, didn't get far. Over the next 48 hours, 6 more executives were arrested. Rachel Voss was picked up at her vacation home in Jackson Hole. Travis Hodge turned himself in. Michael Harrow? He fled. Interpol was notified. The Deep Basin operation was over. But the fallout had only begun. And I was about to become the face of one of the biggest whistleblower cases in modern corporate history. The news broke on a Sunday. By Monday morning, every major outlet had my name. Not by choice, by leak. A government staffer tipped off the press. Suddenly, I wasn't just Jason McCarthy. Anonymous whistleblower. I was a headline. Engineer exposes $80 million laundering scheme inside fintech giant. There were photos, backgrounds, op-eds. I became the face of justice. And paranoia. Vincent was furious. This puts you at risk. We needed 6 more days before the full protective protocols were in place. The FBI reassigned me to a high-security safe location in Vermont. Snow-covered, quiet, disconnected. But safety didn't equal peace. My inbox exploded, lawyers, reporters, death threats. My mother had to be moved for her own protection. Jenna received a warning from an anonymous number. Tell your friend to stop talking. The storm was here. Meanwhile, federal indictments stacked up. Greg, Rachel, Travis, they all folded. One by one, they took plea deals. Harrow was still on the run. Reportedly seen near Macau. And then came the real surprise. Virex Solutions filed for bankruptcy. Not because they were broke, but because the board, fearing further exposure, dissolved the company to bury deeper secrets. Vincent called it the financial equivalent of torching a crime scene. But the FBI had already made backups. And I had kept everything. Congress held hearings. I testified behind a screen. Told them everything. From the first invoice to the hangar sting. Lawmakers looked stunned. One senator called it the most sophisticated internal laundering operation ever uncovered without a federal warrant. But what stuck with me most was what Jenna said after the hearing. You broke it wide open. But you'll never get your old life back. She was right. I tried returning to normal. Tried applying for jobs under a new identity. But every system flagged me. Too public. Too exposed. So I chose something else. I started speaking. First at universities. Then conferences. Then a TED Talk titled, The Price of Integrity. It went viral. Not because I was famous. But because people saw themselves in me. It's been 11 months now. Harrow was finally arrested in Malta. Extradition pending. He's fighting it. But the paper trail is damning. And every document ties back to Project Deep Basin. To Greg. To Rachel. To a system built on silence. And broken by truth. I never thought I'd miss silence. Now, it's the only thing I crave. It's been nearly a year since I cracked open Deep Basin. Since the arrests, the hearings, the headlines. And yet, I live like a man still on the run. Different city every 2 months. No permanent address. Friends filtered through burner phones. Vincent says it's normal. Some cases leave scars. Yours left a crater. I keep trying to find closure. But closure isn't an event. It's a slow erosion. A daily negotiation with memory. Michael Harrow's trial began last week. Live streamed. Federal court. Maximum security. He looked older. Thinner. Still smug. The prosecution spent 3 days just presenting the flowcharts I'd built. One reporter called it a masterclass in digital forensic storytelling. They used my recordings, my emails, my testimony. They asked if I'd appear in court. I declined. Not out of fear, but because I didn't want to see him. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing he once sat above me in the org chart. That man tried to turn me into an accessory. He failed. Jenna checks in once a week. Still at the SEC. Quietly promoted. She calls me the case that changed everything. New laws were passed, more oversight. Tighter controls on shell entities. Better protections for whistleblowers. And yet, I still sleep with a bag packed. Because exposure doesn't end with headlines. Sometimes, it echoes. There's one moment I replay often. The day I sat across from Greg in that hangar. He looked at me like we were brothers. Like I owed him something. And I realized, maybe that's the illusion. That loyalty can be bought. That silence is the same as safety. But I know now, truth is louder than any wiretap. And once spoken, it doesn't return quietly to the dark. The trial will end next month. Harrow faces 25 years. Greg got 12, Rachel 10, Travis 7. The system works. Slowly. Painfully. Imperfectly. But it works, when someone dares to break it open. And I did. Not because I was brave. But because I couldn't unsee what I'd seen. That's what truth does. It marks you. And if you're lucky, it frees you.